I am sorry about that, everyone. My girlfriend gave me a phone call right in the middle, and it disconnected my audio because I am doing this on my phone. She completely forgot that I was doing this live, and I couldn't figure out how to reconnect the audio, so I had to reset the whole thing. But hopefully, people will rejoin. All right. Yeah, I got let's see, we got Hatim. Hello, Hatim. Is that correct?
Yes,
All right, how are you doing today?
I'm good.
Well, that's good to hear. What brings you up here today?
Just wanted to know if, by God, do you mean a disembodied mind that created the universe or sustains the universe, or governs the universe?
Not necessarily. So at this point in time, like really what I'm trying to address is the position that some people hold where any belief in any God is irrational, whether that's, the Spinoza God or a deistic God that doesn't have a mind, or, um, in for myself, the God that I believe in, I hold to the classical theistic understanding of the Abrahamic God, which is that this is a deity or being that is divinely simple. So when we say that this God has a mind, we're not speaking literally. He does not have a mind in the sense that you and I would understand it. It's we're saying, hey, this thing that is the reason why we exist, it looks like it has a mind, so we're just going to say it does, but in reality, it's not a literal mind in the way that we are. It's a bit of a equivocation.
I
Um,
don't know. I don't know what you mean then by mind.
However you were meaning it, like
You just said it
you had
looks
asked,
like a mind, but what does that mean to look like a mind?
no,
That
it
it's not a
looks
mind.
like it has a mind, but because of the dogma of divine simplicity, the dogma of divine simplicity states that God is only his own existence. That's it. You can't say that he has an act. You can't say that he has goodness. You can't say that he has any positive attributes or any attributes in a positive way, because now you're adding something onto that existence, which now negates or contradicts the statement that he is only his own existence.
I'm confused. Are
So,
you saying existence has ontology?
yes, so the understanding is that ontology is what explains the reason why a thing is, or even why a thing actually is. Um, so existence, in my understanding, would require its own ontology, which would be itself.
My understanding is that things have ontology, not ontology has ontology.
Well, I didn't say ontology has ontology. I said
You
that
said
existence
existence.
would have its own ontology, just like things have their own ontology, but the ontology of existence would be its own existence.
What's the difference between existence and ontology?
Ontology is that which gives reason. So, for
Mhm.
example, you have a triangle. The ontology of the triangle having three sides is what gives reason
I
to the
wouldn't say a
sum of its
triangle has
angles.
ontology.
What was that?
I wouldn't say a triangle has ontology.
So, what you would be wanting to say is that the triangle does not have being. Ontology is reason given, being is about existing.
My understanding is ontology is the study of what exists, and to
No,
say
that's
something is
that's metaphysics.
you yeah, ontology is a type of metaphysic.
Ontology is exploring the relationship between reason giving, whereas metaphysics is the study of things with being or things that have existence.
No, because free will is a topic in metaphysics, and that's not talking about
No,
what.
no. free will is a topic in philosophy,
right?
um,
And metaphysics
but
is a philosophical
and
topic.
yes, but metaphysics is not the entirety of philosophy. It's like you have science, but geology is not physics, but both are science.
I understand what you're saying, but I know that free will is a metaphysic, even though it's not.
No,
Uh,
it's in a um, so ontology. The definition defines the concepts, categories, and relationships that exist within a specific domain. So
where are you
it's
looking that
talking.
at?
I just put in Google, and that was the definition that came up. Um, and ontology from Merriam-Webster, a branch of metaphysics concerned with the nature and relations of being. So being is about the act of existence, and ontology, like it says there, is about the nature and relations of being. So it's about the
So,
relationships of things with being.
so when you say X has ontic status, you don't. You're saying if X has ontic status, that's not synonymous to saying X exists. Correct?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. No, we're just using the language differently. That's fine. Um, when you for when I say exists, right? I say there's a concrete particular. When you say
Mhm.
exists, what do you think? Because it's not that, right? Unless you do agree with that.
So I have no issue with that. It's going to depend on whether one takes a Kantian approach to it or not. Um, I have no issue granting someone that particular definition of exist. But I also like how Heidegger points out that in order for us to have a conversation about anything, there needs to be some kind of thing for us or subject for us to talk about. Now, whether that thing or subject has a particular existence in physical reality is a different question, but there's still some kind of being that is present. Um, but a lot of people nowadays like the Kantian approach of like how existence is not a predicate. It's just what actualizes a particular thing. Um, but at that point, if you hold to that, the relationship between, like, say, a unicorn and metaphysical nothing gets a little bit weird because there seems to be something different between the unicorn, because we can talk about what attributes a unicorn would have if it did have actual existence versus a um, versus actual nothingness, which we can't even talk about because there is nothing that is there for us to even talk about.
Okay. Right. And so I just want to be clear about um, your idea of God doesn't seem like a God that an atheist would deny. Is that correct?
That's my goal, actually. I'm not trying to do this to like trick people or anything like that, but the goal that I'm trying to do is first get people over this hurdle of whether or not the belief in God is rational. And then once I can show them that it is rational, then my goal is to show them that there is some ultimate grounding of all of existence, which is what I call God. And then step by step, by careful step, walking along the way to that route. Um, but that first step has got to be here
When you
on
say
whether or
all,
not,
when you say all of existence, you just mean all of the set of all things that exist, correct?
yes,
You don't mean existence simpliciter.
correct.
Okay. Now, when you say grounding all the things that exist, you're
Hmm.
saying there's no thing that could exist without a causal explanation. Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay, so
Um,
what do you mean by grounding?
so what I mean by grounding is kind of going back to that triangle example. So the reason that the angles of a triangle, when you add them up together, will always equal 180 degrees is due to the nature of the triangle itself, as in it having three
You
sides.
just mean the
It ha-
definition of a triangle.
so it having three sides is the ontology or reason for the sum of those angles being what they are. That's not a causal relationship, but that is an ontological one. And that's what I mean by grounding. It's just because of the way that the triangle is, it is giving the reason for the sum of those angles. So
Is there a
something can be
difference
its
between the nature of X and the definition of X?
not particularly, and that's why I use dependent and independent because a dependent thing is something that would require something external to its definition to give reason for it versus something that is able to provide its own reason within its own definition.
Like what? I don't understand that.
Well, kind of like what you were saying with the triangle. The triangle is its own reason for the sum of the angles being what it is. And if we were to take that as to the reason for existing, that's what a independent thing would be. Have you read Leibniz and his talk about contingent and necessary truths?
I don't read.
Oh, you might. I would highly recommend looking into stuff like that then.
I learn by conversations like these. That's what I
Yeah,
do.
and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with having conversations like these. Um, but if you don't read and you don't come to your own ideas yourself, how do you know that the person you're speaking to is providing sound or good arguments? I could be spouting BS for all you know, and just because I talk well, it sounds good and sounds convincing, and you walk away with a false idea.
Well, I'm 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 analyzing everything you're saying. It's not like I'm
Right,
letting you go for free.
right. You are analyzing it, but if you don't know how to analyze well, then I could still mislead you, or I could be saying the right things, but because you don't know how to analyze well, you could come to a wrong conclusion. That's why I was just saying, like,
Well, I
you
I
want
think
to
I
do
can
both.
analyze well without having to read a specific thing. I mean, whether or not what you're saying is,
There's
exact.
a lot, like, logic is the art of analyzing statements and things like that, and there's a lot of logical arguments out there that if you don't know how to analyze well, you're never going to get to a good
I I know how to
solution.
analyze well.
Okay.
I thought you were asking me to read a specific argument, but not reading that specific argument doesn't mean I don't know how to analyze, brother.
Well, so hang on. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Um, so there is, um, so this is a logic puzzle. There is an otherwise deserted and isolated island. 200 perfect logicians are stranded, and these islanders are perfectly logical in every decision they make, and they will not do anything unless they are absolutely certain of the outcome. However, they cannot communicate with each other, and they are forbidden from speaking with one another or signing or writing messages in the sand, else they be shot dead by the captain of a mysterious ship that visits the island each night. Of
What's
the
this supposed
200,
to be doing?
it's setting the framework. So you have this island with 200 people on it, and they cannot communicate with each
So
other.
what's
If
the
they
relevance of this hypothetical?
I'm showing the need that just because you think you can analyze well, if you don't have the study and the expertise, these types of questions are going to trip you up.
Brother, I know how to reason. I have a degree in philosophy and I'm studying for the LSAT. I know how to
So you
reason.
have read.
Yeah, I
You
don't
said you
read.
don't read.
I don't read. That doesn't mean I haven't read. Like I just don't like to read.
I am shocked then that you got a degree in philosophy and you're not familiar with Leibniz then.
It's not like I'm not familiar. I'm not good with names.
So and trust me, I can relate to that. So Leibniz statement as far as like necessary and contingent truths is like the very foundation of modal logic.
Yeah, I know about modal logic. I just don't like.
Okay.
I'm just not familiar with names.
Okay. So you are then aware that like necessary truths or necessary statements is something like 2 plus 2 equals 4, where the truth of that statement is contained within itself, correct?
Yeah, yeah, it's something that's
Okay.
analytically true.
And then you have something like the door is closed, which is contingent
Synthetically,
on the door being actually closed, right?
right. That's
So,
an investigatory claim.
yeah. So, what I am saying is that dependent things is like that door is closed statement. It requires something outside of itself in order for it to be the case. Versus an independent thing, which is something like the 2 plus 2 equals 4, which doesn't require anything outside of itself in order for it to be that it is.
Right. I understand what you're saying. It just sounds like defining something into existence,
Oh, I'm not defining anything into existence. Like,
or like
um,
you're just reifying what existence is to call that God.
no. Um, like if you look at the like, I do agree that I still need to do some work on the argument. Um, but the when I was presenting it to, Dr. Blitz and other individuals who know this type of stuff very, very well, um, the point that I was getting at is even they didn't didn't claim that I was defining existence into existence. Even they agreed that I wasn't defining God into existence. The only issue that they had was that I didn't rule out brute contingencies. And if brute contingencies are the case, then the argument doesn't follow. And I also didn't rule out priority monism. And if priority monism is the case, then my reason for rejecting the universe as this independent thing
Hello?
doesn't follow.
You're
Can
skipping.
can you hear me?
There you go. I can hear you now.
Yeah. So
You said
if
something after you said priority monism and then you skipped.
yeah, so if priority monism is the case, then that means that I can't rule out the universe as this thing whose identity is existence, as I was doing in the argument. So until I show those two things, then the argument doesn't follow, but the argument does not define God into existence.
Right. And so just to be clear, if you're not believing in a mind that created, sustained, or governs the universe, and I'm not saying mind, it doesn't have to be a mind as we know it. It could just be a mind simpliciter. If that's not what you believe, then I do feel like any atheist or agnostic that would come up here who has that understanding wouldn't necessarily disagree with this.
And that's fine. There are people though who would say that even a independent thing that has no mind is irrational. And that's what I'm trying to show is that no, there can be rationality.
Well, whether or not there can be is obviously the case,
Yeah.
but I think there needs to be you need to establish that you are rational. That not that there can be a rational. Not, you know what I mean? Like
And
uh,
and
any
the thing
belief,
is
any hypothetical belief can be rational. The question is whether or not somebody's actually justified, not whether or not
so
it can be justified.
well no, so but that's the thing is that like I was saying, I like there are justifications to reject brute contingencies, and there are justifications to reject priority monism. Those just weren't included in my argument, and I need to figure out a way to include those in my argument.
But if you believe in X, until you justify X, you're irrational in X.
Not necessarily,
And
because
how do you justify?
there are people. So in science, you currently have um, two opinions as far as whether or not the universe has an infinite past. So there is no first temporal moment, and you have people who believe that there is a first temporal moment. There is no way to show any strength of one over the other. And so you have
That
some
doesn't mean
scientists,
they're rational.
well, you have some scientists who pick one over the other, and you have some scientists who have abstained from making a judgment decision in any case. However, all three positions can be rational and often are very rational.
I agree they can be, but unless they tell you why their position is
Mhm.
true over the other, right? Then they can't
It,
be.
no, no, no.
Know what?
Now you're up. So do you know the difference between valid and sound?
Yes.
Okay. So if something is valid, does that mean that the premise follows from the conclusion? Or the
Yes.
conclusions follow from the premise? Okay.
Yes.
So if the conclusion follows from the premise,
Yes.
and I have a reason to think, not know, think each premise is true, should I accept the conclusion as true or not, even if I don't know it's true?
If yeah, you'd have to be justified in why you think it's true.
Well, I am because I think the premises are true.
Yeah, you'd have to be justified as to why you think the premises are true.
Okay, but I can't prove the premises beyond a shadow of a doubt, but I have good reason to think that they are
If
true.
you think they're over 50%, then that's reason enough.
Okay, and who decides on that 50%?
I'm not sure how. Maybe some Bayesian analysis.
How, and Bayesian analysis is going to be dependent on each individual based on their own experience and their own particular priors.
Right. And if they can demonstrate that, then they'd be justified.
Okay, and what if for someone who, because of their own particular priors, what would then lead
Huh?
this individual to accept this because their priors don't match the other individual's priors?
Let's just say that one more time.
So you have two individuals. They have different Bayesian priors.
Right.
Because of that, they arrive at different conclusions because, but for both of them, the Bayesian priors justifies each of their premises above 50%.
Right.
But they both can't be true, and
Right.
they
They're
both
both
can't be over.
justified. Yeah, they're both justified, but one is wrong.
Yeah. So my priors have me believing that each of these things is over 50% for my premises. You
Right. Right.
disagree?
Yeah, that's fine. But I think some of the I think some people mistake about what their priors are, right? So maybe that could be a conversation.
Yeah, and that's a whole other conversation as far, like you said, as far as like what is justification. Heck, that's the whole issue with justified true belief as a definition for knowledge. But the point that I'm making here is one can be justified and have rational reason for a wrong conclusion. I am not here to argue that God actually exists or that it is true that God exists. I am merely saying that one can have a rational reason to conclude that there is a God.
Right. And I think most people don't really consider alternative hypotheses to the belief that they have. And so when I think of somebody that's justified, I think that they've considered the alternative hypotheses
Hmm.
and they have reasons as to why that particular opposing alternative hypothesis does not obtain.
Yeah,
And if
and
they
I've done that.
and so typically what I do when people say they're justified, I want to investigate it, and I offer the alternative hypothesis, and I ask them why is that uh, less true than the hypothesis you believe. And if they fail, would you agree that if they fail given a reason, right, then they're not justified?
It could be a case of them not being able to communicate it well. It
Okay,
could
if
be a
they fail,
case
how
that,
about this? How about this? If they fail in giving a reason, then you would not have uh,
yeah,
justification in thinking that they're justified.
well, I would be justified in not accepting their conclusion. I don't know if
Right.
I'd go so far as to say that
You wouldn't be
they're,
justified in thinking that they are justified. If
I,
they
I
fail to
can,
give if they fail to give a justification as to why they believe X over Y, you wouldn't be justified in thinking that they are justified in believing X is over Y. Correct?
if I can see the logical path, even if I disagree with the premises, I can still say that they're justified.
No, no. If they can't even express to you how they're justified, how would you know if they're justified?
Then, because then I would see the logical fallacy inherent within their argument.
Okay, right. But let's say they can't even give an argument, right? You wouldn't be justified in thinking they are, right?
Then they're not being rational if they can't give an argument.
But let's say they're rational, but they can't express it, like you said earlier. Like they do have reasons, they just don't. They're just not good with expressing the reasons. If that's
Then
true, if that's true, you still wouldn't be justified in thinking they are justified, right?
that's fine. But you
Right?
were saying if I disagree with someone, then I must conclude that they're not justified. No, I
No,
disagree
no,
with
that's
that.
not what I said. I didn't ask that. I never asked that.
You said if you don't agree with their
I
conclusion,
never asked that. I never said anything about you agreeing with them.
I
I
mean,
said, I said if they can't explain or oh
and when I said if I can follow along and see the logic within their premises that lead them to their conclusion, even if I disagree with the premises or disagree with the conclusion, I can
right,
still
I didn't.
say that they're
Maybe
justified,
you mentioned it. I didn't mention anything about you agreeing with
and
it.
you disagreed with that.
I don't. Obviously, it's not about whether or not you agree with to somebody if they're rational. I'm talking about if somebody can't explicate, can't explain
Hmm.
why it's true, one hypothesis is over another for whatever
Hmm.
reason, right? Somebody listening to them or hearing their reasoning analysis is
Hmm.
not going to be justified in thinking that they are justified because
That's
they
fine.
haven't because they
That
haven't
that
heard explanations to why they are
yeah,
justified. You
that's
agree with that,
fine.
right?
Yeah, that's fine. That
Okay,
then
good.
becomes a question of convincibility.
No,
Like
it's not
that is
about being
a
convinced. It's not about being convinced. It's
well,
about
no.
them being able to have reasons for themselves as to why they themselves are convinced, not about you.
So, but that now you're moving the. So that's the point that in distinction I'm trying to make here. Someone can be justified to themselves, and if they are unable or fail to present those justifications to another, then the person can walk away not convinced or not seeing the justification for that position. So, because of that, there's a difference between saying person A is not justified for their position and saying I don't see the justification for their position. Those are two different statements.
Yes,
I am
I'm
perfectly
talking
fine
about the.
saying I am perfectly fine saying the second statement, but a lot of people will say the first statement about belief in God, period.
Yeah, but like I said, I don't. I think there could be a belief in God that's irrational, right?
Oh yeah,
And but then
absolutely. I agree
you've
that there are
defined
beliefs in
God. I think you've defined God in such a way that obviously, if God is just existence simpliciter, nobody's going to disbelieve in the existence simpliciter. Of course, existence simpliciter um, is going to like have a possibility that can be justifiably believed.
and that's fine. Like I said, right now the point of the conversation is addressing this because there are people who will say that no matter the God and no matter how you understand God, it is always irrational.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to address.
Okay. But I think, yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think there's going to be anybody that's actually seriously,
Oh, I met some of them yesterday.
but do they understand what you mean by God?
They expressed and said that they did, and they said that it still made no sense that, and is irrational and is based on fear. Um,
Yeah. Then that sounds like
so,
they didn't understand what God meant by what you mean.
I mean, for them, they were saying that the fear is about effectively loneliness. Like they had different ways of expressing it.
That sounds
Now,
like they're talking
whether,
about following up a religion or something.
I mean, and that's fine, that's my thought process as well. But the point is that there are people who think that God cannot be expressed in any way. Whether they're correct or not is a different understanding, and I think they are incorrect, which is what you're touching on. But they do make the claim that belief in God is irrational no matter what.
Okay.
So that's what I'm trying to get at, is showing, hey, no,
And
no,
you
no,
don't, just to be clear, you don't believe in a God, and by God, as in a mind that created, sustained, or governs the universe in mind simplicity. You don't believe in that God.
I don't believe that the grounding of all of reality has parts, which would then it mean that the um, it having a mind would now introduce parts to it.
I wouldn't say you necessarily have to commit yourself to having parts if you have a mind, like
Well,
being the
then it'd
mind.
be well, no,
Like
no,
if
but
you
that's what
are the mind, right?
now it's
There's
mind.
nothing partial about the mind. There's nothing exterior to you about the
Now
mind.
it's
It's just
now it's
are the mind.
mind. Now it's mind. The fact that it exists and the different thoughts it has, and those thoughts would be different to each other. And now we've introduced bare minimum three, if not more, depending on how many quote unquote thoughts there are. So that's why it can't have a mind, because it can only be existence.
Okay, and if it's just existence,
Hmm.
right? That's not going to be compatible with atheism. I mean, that's not going to be incompatible with atheism.
That's fine. Like I said, that's my goal, is to show.
Which means the kind of God you believe is indistinguishable. It's not going to be. It doesn't make sense
This
for
is
you to
the
call the
first.
theist, right? Because
This is the
you'd be like
first.
you'd be
This
compatible with the atheist if you're.
this is the first step of many. So I'm not stopping
I'm not
here,
talking
but
about the first step. I'm talking about the whole step. Every
well, no, no,
step.
no, no.
I'm asking about that. That's what I asked about.
Yeah,
I asked
well,
about
no,
what you
no.
believe.
Yeah. So, but that's what I'm saying, is for the conversation today, I am just talking about this step, about
I I
God
I
Simplicator.
I think we're done with the conversation today because I think we've already established that the way you're defining it makes sense. It's fine.
Yeah.
I asked a further step. I just was curious about your personal belief,
Hmm.
right? Not just about what you want to express today. And
So
I'm
then
asking
that
about your personal belief, as in, do you believe in a God that's incompatible with atheism?
I think I do, because the atheist is going to say that this God does not interact with reality, even if they do grant the title of God to it. And I think it does. But that's a whole other conversation
You're
beyond what
saying
I
that
want to have
your belief
here
is
today.
incompatible with an atheist, like not atheists you know of, but atheism simpliciter.
Yes.
Okay, so so you do believe in a God that created, sustains, and governs the universe.
You kept adding mind in there, and I kept stressing no.
No, no, I'm talking about that's what atheists are going to be committed to believe, that there's a disembodied mind, that there
And
isn't a
that's not
disembodied mind.
and that's not what I believe.
Right. So it is. So if you don't believe that, then it is compatible with atheism. That's what I'm trying to say to you.
Well, the atheist is going to say that this God does not interact in a way that we can observe with reality, and I disagree. But that's a whole
Some
other conversation.
some atheists may say that, right? But atheism, the
If
belief,
if if
atheism simpliciter is not committed to saying that.
so, atheists who say that it's possible for there to be an external being of all of reality that interact with reality.
Whether or not I know an atheist is different to whether or not atheism commits you to that.
I mean, atheism commits yourself to the statement of, depending on how you define it, in academic or layperson. An academic is going to say positively that there is no God, even um, the grounding of all reality. They might say that the universe is its own grounding, or they might say that there's a brute contingent fact. Um, and then you have the lay understanding of the term atheism, which is just that, hey, I don't know if there is a God or not. I lack belief in that God. And the way that they understand God is just something that has interaction with reality.
Right. My understanding is that atheism, right, in regards to What most atheists, or like the typical definition of God that they operate with, right? When they say there is no God, because obviously you can define God, you can use the utterance of God to mean anything. Somebody can say that God is my left toe, right? My left big toe, and that's what I mean by God. So it wouldn't make sense to say that somebody doesn't believe in God, because obviously if you can demonstrate your left
But
toe, then
that's
you
not
perfectly believe.
so. But that's
About
so. That's
but what I'm
the
trying to
same
say
thing.
is the typical understanding of God is going to be a mind, a
No,
disembodied mind,
so
or
here's
maybe
the
from
thing you've got to understand. This
okay,
idea of God as divinely simple existed with the ancient Greeks before Jesus even existed, and was then introduced to the Abrahamic faiths by Philo of Alexandria in like 40 BC, and was widely accepted and embraced by the Christian community by like the 180, so the very early church fathers, and was then picked up and embraced by the Islamic community by earliest that I know of is Averroes, um, and that was around like the 11th century AD, but it
okay.
probably existed much earlier than that within Islam.
I'm not
So
talking about
this,
how long it is. How long it's
well,
been
but
since.
that's what I'm saying is that this idea isn't a new one and isn't
I
a
never said it was
redefinition
new.
of it.
I
And
never said it was new. What do
well,
you think I said?
you were referring to it as a redefinition and
No,
equating it to
no,
calling my big toe God, when what I'm trying to point to is that this is the
no.
historical understanding, and people misunderstanding the history of it
I'm not
is
talking
not.
about that. I'm not talking about historical or non-historical, right? What I'm saying is it's non-typical.
That's that's fine, but that's not the same as a redefinition, which is what you
I'm
were.
not saying it was a redefinition.
Then why were you? Then
I
why
was
were
giving
you
an
saying
example of somebody talking about God in a way that others don't.
so? But where in history has people used God to refer to their big toe?
That's irrelevant. That's not the relevant distinction that I made.
That is relevant because it belittles my position and presents it as this
No,
novel
it's
idea to
you're
try
not
to
listening.
avoid something.
Look, the relevant the relevant um property of the analogy wasn't that it's a wasn't that it's some novel new
Then a
well-defined
better
definition.
example,
What I
then a
was
better
talking
example,
the point of
Hatim.
the point of the analogy was just to show that somebody's obviously referring to God in a way that is not typically understood.
So Hatim,
Yes, sir.
the better analogy would have been scientific theory as it's understood by the scientific community versus by the lay people with a very limited understanding of what scientific theory means, where they equate it to mean, um, oh man, the word slipped my mind, but um, I want to say hypotenuse, but I know that's the triangle because I'm stuck on triangles, but hypothesis.
As long as you
Um,
understand the point, that's all that matters. Whatever hypothetical works for you.
well, no, but that's what I'm saying is you need to understand that your analogies carry weight and that they carry intention. So if your intention was just, hey, CT, the way you're using God is not one that most people are familiar with, that's fine. I agree with that.
That's what I said.
But
Yes.
the analogy you used is one that is used to belittle and one that is used to indicate that what I am doing is something underhanded or
Maybe
trickery.
that's how you understood it, but that's not how I got it. Now, that's fine. We can move on. Anyways, so that being the case, it seems like at least I've never met an atheist that understands atheism as anything other than, you know, the belief that there is no disembodied mind that's causally efficacious and has sufficient power to, create the world at
I
the very
mean,
minimum. Huh?
I mean, if I was to say, hey, this is what I understand, like, and I present my understanding, hey, this is what I understand to be God, I met a lot of atheists
No, no, I'm
who
not saying.
say,
Listen what I'm saying. I'm not saying there's no atheist that also doesn't believe in what you're believing in,
yeah,
right? And also thinks that you're unjustified. And
well,
also thinks that what you're saying is false, right? There's a bunch of atheists that also, don't believe that, LeBron James is the best player of all time. All I'm saying is atheism as atheists understand it doesn't commit you to that particular belief of your understanding of God does not exist. It just my understanding of what atheists typically understand atheism to commit you is that there is no disembodied mind that's causally efficacious with sufficient power to create.
And I have atheist friends who say that, hey, even if this thing exists, they will say, I agree the need for an independent thing. I think that's the universe. And I don't and even if you were correct that there is this independent thing who has existence as its identity, I don't call it God, and I don't think it's God because I don't think it interacts with reality. Which you're saying that one can still be an atheist and still think it interacts with reality.
Correct.
Which
because
is
atheism doesn't talk about anything other as typically understood that a disembodied mind. Now, it sounds like you don't believe in a disembodied mind, so you just be going against you. There may be some overlap of what atheists that you're experiencing also talk about, right? Which is what you're talking about, right? Maybe they have some other causal theory.
So
right?
At this point, Hatim, this is turning into a semantic discussion. Like I said, you don't like looking. You said you don't like reading. I would highly recommend, especially if you've got your philosophy degree. It's obviously because you love philosophy.
Yeah, I read.
But
it's not a problem. Look, I just want to come to understanding, right?
But
How we
what
come
I'm
to
getting at,
understanding that
Hatim,
the way you're discussing God in this live and in your belief is not going to be incompatible with the typical understanding of God, correct?
that's fine. What I'm getting at, though, Hatim, is that what I would recommend is if you want to engage in these conversations and then be fruitful and not devolve into this semantic discussion, which we've been in for I don't know
Yeah.
how long.
I think we have been
Look,
fruitful. I don't know what you mean.
look into and read more on the subject and understand what the terms mean within this dialogue. So that way, then you're not going into this argument of like, well, this is how I understand atheism to be when it's contrary to what the academics understand it to be.
Okay. The point I'm trying to make is
So
that do we agree, brother, that the way you're discussing God is not the typical understanding of God?
I said that already, that yes, I understand that it's
Okay,
not
great.
typical.
And
So I'm going
atheism
to
does
go
not
ahead.
commit you.
I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next guest. We've already talked about these points. And at this point, we're just saying the same thing over and over again. I do wish you a good rest of your day.
Okay. See ya.
See ya. All right. So before we go on to the next guest, first of all, thank you everyone for the likes, the follows. Greatly appreciate it. I do have a Discord up. Unfortunately, because of the way that my account is and how early it is, I'm not able to put a link in my profile, but you can either send me a DM and I can get the invite link out to you, or you can copy and paste my link tree that's on my profile. It will take you to both my YouTube and Discord channels for you to check out. I hope to see y'all there. But let's go ahead and get Len up. They tried to join before, and I promised that the next time that they showed up, I'd go ahead and put them at the front. Hey, Len.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going all right. What brings you up here?
I've actually seen you on Ian's live before, and you
Okay.
seem like a sort of a good faith individual. So
I try to be.
I'd sort of, I thought I'd all come up and, well, your prompt says belief in God is rational.
Mhm.
I guess so. I'm sort of like agnostic, I suppose. I am sympathetic towards like the concepts of God. I know the discussion you were having with Hatim. Well, I wasn't following along the entire time, but it seemed like it was like sort of, you were analyzing sort of what God really, I guess, means in order to make sense of the prompt. So
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, go on.
So, and part of it is kind colored by the fact that I grew up and studied classical theism uh, in depth growing up. So my like
Mm,
as I was acknowledging my understanding of God, even within the Christian understanding, is not what most people are going to encounter. I'm
okay.
very transparent about that, or at least I try to be. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Because I think her team
so
was like, her team was sort of, using like the standard, analytic
mhm.
philosophy definition, sort of this.
So
Uh,
in my study, even in analytic philosophy, they have no problem calling what I refer to as God. When I
yeah.
say the standard, I'm talking about like you meet your random theist, especially like a theist call-in on Ian's show,
Yep.
that they kind of hold to this maximally powerful being that is complex and has parts
Yep.
versus something like myself who believes that it's not that God is maximally great because of his parts. He is maximally infinitely great because there is no parts, therefore there's not even a limit to him. And if there's no limit to him, that means he's infinite, because that's what infinite means, is not finite. Um, and so we can only talk about God in these negative terminologies. Um, and all of that is within like high level philosophical conversations within this. That's why I was talking about like a good example or a good analogy of how I'm doing this is like the scientific terminology for theory, where it means explanation of all the available evidence versus how most people think of theory, where it's a uh, man, I'm forgetting the word again. Um, hypothesis.
Hypothesis.
Yeah, I keep wanting to say hypotenuse, and I know that's not right. But um, so I do understand that the way that I understand and approach the question is not the way that most people on shows like this are familiar with.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I understand. Um, yeah. So I guess so. I sort of came up because I sort of have some objections to. Um, I have some sort of standard objections to sort of
mhm.
God. But that
Okay.
God is more in the sense of like, um, like a mind that created the universe, has the omni properties.
Yeah.
I don't know if that interacts like directly with your prompt. If you want to discuss that,
Yeah.
because I'm sort of again sympathetic towards the God concept. Like,
Mhm.
and in fact, I agree with you in many senses. I think there is a tendency for people to sort of anthropomorphize God, give him like all
Yep.
these like human attributes of like a mind, and it should be understood in like a more less in that sort of way. So I have a tendency to agree with you there. But
Mhm.
would you say, for example, like the problem of evil poses at least some of a threat, or at least some of an objection towards your
Yeah.
conception of God?
So to kind of get to that, you would need to understand how the omni traits relate to the dogma of divine simplicity and God as existence simplicator, essentially. Um, so, in this understanding, it's not accurate to say that God is good in a literal equivocal sense, because now we're saying God is existence plus goodness. The way I like to
Mm-hmm.
describe it is that if one, so we experience God's existence, and from that existence implicator, we experience something that we would attribute to goodness. And so we say that God is good, but in reality, what we're experiencing is that divinely simple existence. The analogy I like to use is the benevolent cosmic horror. Um, if you've ever read like Lovecraft's novels, and when he's talking about these people encountering these cosmic horrors, these cosmic entities, these entities are so vast and so far beyond even just their appearance, their presence, that the human mind cannot grasp to even begin to comprehend or explain that understanding. And so they try, but the language fails because we're not capable of explaining it. Now, how does that relate to the divine simplicity? Aristotle points out that we come to understand things by breaking them down into their simpler parts. Well, if God is simple, meaning he has no parts, then there's no parts that we can further break down. And so we do the other thing that we're able to do by adding on to it. But as soon as we start adding on to it, now we're no longer talking about the thing. It's the same problem that Heidegger points out when we try to talk about nothingness, because nothing is not a thing. It's not an object. It doesn't even have a relationship to being the negation of an object, because that in and of itself is still pointing to a thing. Thus, anytime we try to talk about nothing, we're talking about this illusionary thing that we're turning into a subject, even though it's not actually a subject. And so we're kind of doing the same thing with God when we say that God is good. So that's a bit of a long preamble to then get into the second part of the problem of evil. And it's that most people view evil as a positive, as in it has being. It's a thing that exists. In Catholicism, especially within classical theism, evil is understood to be a privation in the same way that that light is the thing that has being, and darkness is the privation of light. So darkness does not have being. It's just what happens when there is no light or light is blocked. Evil does not have being. It is just what happens when good is corrupted or absent.
Right. Yeah. I get what you mean. So, evil doesn't really have like such an ontology.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the point, though. I guess I feel the problem of evil can still sort of go through. Even if evil doesn't have an ontology, we can we can still use it meaningfully, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This isn't to say we can't
switch out. Yeah, yeah.
This isn't to say we can't switch that out.
Yeah. But yeah, the point is, like, I guess I'm gonna assume sort of the So evil we can switch out for like privation of good or like lack of good. It still seems, the typical way that the at least evidential problem of evils run. I'm sure is sort of like
the natural disasters and suffering.
Yeah, it's like unexpected. So even if it doesn't have like an ontology, this lack of good, we can say, is unexpected.
So if you understand evil as that privation and lack of ontology, then natural disasters do have ontology. Therefore, we can't necessarily say that they're evil. This then gets into something that, again, classical theism calls the principle of double effect, where my favorite example to use is killing in self-defense. So your life is in danger, and you want to preserve your life because that's a good, right?
Sorry, I think you. Can you repeat that again? I think you lagged out for a bit.
So, someone wants to take your life or do harm to you, and you want to preserve your life because that's a good, right? And so you are going to take the actions necessary to achieve that good, even if, unfortunately, it leads to the death of the other individual. Now, you don't intend for that other individual to pass away. If you can preserve your own life without that, then you'll be satisfied. So with natural disasters, the principle of double effect is being applied there as well, in my understanding, because if you look at it, things like hurricanes, earthquakes, and volcanoes, they all do things to restore and bring about the nature within the ecosystem. In fact, even like forest fires, when they happen naturally, it actually enables the ground to get more fertile thus the plant's more healthy and remove the dead growth that's been occurring since the last forest fire. So these are not evils in the sense that they are a privation of a good. It's more of that they have a good that has an undesired effect, because we, in Catholic theology at the very least, we are no longer in harmony with nature. And so we are suffering from that undesired effect harsher than what was originally intended.
Okay. I guess I have 2 points to that. So I just want to understand, just to ensure I've got this right. So you're saying, for example, natural disasters. To be fair, my example wasn't actually going to be with natural disasters. It was going to be like with, well, we can go with natural disasters. So I think what you're saying is natural disasters, in and of themselves, like they're like ontically good, but
or at least neutral.
Yeah. So they're like neutral, and there's certain, I guess, effects of it that can be, I guess, from our perspective, considered bad
or undesirable.
Or undesirable, yeah. And then, but ultimately, its sort of purpose is for, as you said, flourishing of ecosystems, fertilization of soil, stuff like that, right? So you're saying, I guess you're sort of reframing the evil. It's more like
and that's where I think the conversation, as far as like the problem of evil, actually needs to be taken place. As far as like actually defining what it means for something to be evil, because like you were saying, like, hey, even with this privation theory, I think the problem of evil can still work. Now, I did make a presumption on my part, so I do apologize, because usually most people will then point to, natural disasters. So I do apologize, and I do want to hear what you wanted to bring up. But as far as like the natural disasters critique, once you understand evil as privation, then natural disasters can't be defined as an evil, because they're not a privation of a thing. Now, are they in conflict with other things that we do desire and are good? Sure. And that's where that principle of double effect comes in. So that's, but as you touched on, the question really then becomes, okay, so it seems like there's a bit of a reframing going on, kind of, because the way that Christianity, since starting as early as St. Augustine, if not earlier, understood evil as that privation. But unfortunately, a lot of Christians, and so a lot of non-believers, also hold to this idea of evil having this ontological existence, ontological form of being. That now the question has gotten muddied, and we need to redirect and reframe that question back to that proper understanding of what evil is before we can even determine if there is a problem of evil. But what was the example that you wanted to bring up?
So, I guess before I say that, this will lead into it, but I guess perhaps the way we can progress into this is we can have sort of like the, your hypothesis of an all-loving God. I don't mean that in like the classical sense, but I mean that in the sense that you were explaining before. And then we can just say like a bare bones naturalism, and then we can say and then we can look at a certain instance of privation of good in the world. So we can say, the one I wanted to bring up was evolutionary animal suffering, and we can say, is evolutionary animal suffering this instance of privation of good? Is this more expected under naturalism, or is it more expected on like a omnigod? So there's two arguments or positions that one can take there. Before you go into that, maybe I guess I can give some perspective on why I think it would be unexpected. Now, do keep in mind, of course, I obviously have a bias for, the traditional sort of definition of God, right? This,
or at least the more popular one, Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. I am sort of biased towards that, but I think it will still be sort of useful to discuss here. So I think even before considering any evidence, something like evolution, right, under naturalism, is going to be probably like the only way that life could really form, because under naturalism, well, if you take it synonymous with like physicalism, life is going to arise through some sort of physical process, whether it's like, like, evolution, this gradual process where, molecules and genetics and all these sorts of factors will sort of influence the formation of life. So it's sort of the only way for life to form under naturalism. Whereas on the God hypothesis, there is all the natural mechanisms, but also many, many, many sort of supernatural ways. Like God could have just made us, ex nihilo. God could have made us from all sorts of things, right? So first thing to consider is antecedently that evolution is going to be more expected on naturalism.
Right.
But then I think we have further reason for which is sort of like convergence on the problem of evil. I think we have further reason to think that God wouldn't create us through evolution. Well, presumably you don't take like a literalist account of the Bible. Presumably
Correct.
you do believe in evolution. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think, given that God is all loving, I guess just through like a common sense sort of intuition pump, if you were to imagine like on a faraway planet, there's like this alien grandmaster or king, I should say. And, I told you he's all loving, he's extremely powerful, and you sort of observe the world, and the way he's brought up the alien race is through this brutal means that's lasted of violence and, killing a lot of, basically a lot of violence, brutality, and that's lasted like millions of years. Yeah, so just as like an intuition pump, that would be why I think at least God, in the same way God would have reason not to allow stuff. So there's first sort of the prior probability, well, the antecedent probability, and then also sort of the reasons God would have against it. So I guess, what's your sort of take on all that?
So there's two approaches. Both of them actually come from Thomas Aquinas. So he talks about what's called a conflict of goods. And that is what he calls suffering, is when you have two things that are both good yet are in conflict with each other. Now, because we are finite, because we are physical and have limits and are in this finite space, there's limits to us, and there's going to be times where what's good for me is not going to be good for another, and what's good for the other isn't going to be good for me. An easy example of this, I need to eat, but so do you, right? So when I consume, I am now removing whatever I consumed for me from you being able to consume that specific thing. Now, granted, that doesn't remove all of consumption, but if there's only one bite or one sip of water left on a deserted island, as taking this to an extreme example, me consuming it isn't evil in and of itself, even though, because I'm preserving my good, even though it's denying your good. So that's a source of, so that conflict of goods is what Thomas Aquinas calls the source of suffering. Now, the second question then, as you were pointing out to, okay, so fine, there's this finite thing and everything else, but why did God make it that way? And this gets into something that I brought up on Justin's live Wednesday evening about fittingness. And, Justin was pointing out, hey, it could be the case that, like, if the cross is what enabled the chains of sin and death to be broken and for the gates of heaven to be opened, why even use the cross in the first place? Why didn't God just snap his fingers and open the gates of heaven and destroy the chains of sin and death? He could have done that. And Thomas Aquinas agrees. He then says, now the question is, because we can't use natural reason to predict or show why God had to use the cross, because God did not have to use the cross. He could have done it any other way.
Mm-hmm.
Now the question is, what is the goal that God had in mind that made the cross the best way to achieve that goal? And this type of problem he calls fittingness. So now the question is, why was it fitting for God to create the universe in such a way where evolution is the best way for him to achieve whatever goal he had in mind? And that's not something that we're ever going to have like a specific answer to. But that's where the realm then becomes. So the suffering from evolution, like I was saying, comes from that conflict of goods. And now the question then becomes, why is this the most fitting way then for God to achieve what he did? One possible way is in order to inspire us to rise above that, because there's nothing necessarily wrong with evolution in and of itself, but we are called to be greater than that, so to speak. So like in that island example, again, I as a Christian am called not to take that last sip of water for myself, but to give it to you, to take on that conflict of goods, but instead of taking it for myself, providing it to you. That's what I'm called to do as a Christian. So that could be the case as to why. I'm not going to sit here and say that I have the answer as to why. I don't know why. But that is the realm that question is in, because it is the opinion of Thomas Aquinas that there are many things about what God does that we're never going to be able to know. We can make reasoned guesses and hypotheses, but it's never going to move from that to the realm of we know it to be this way.
Yeah. Maybe I'm not tracking the first part. So I understand your conflict of two goods example. And then I understand your point about sort of, you might not have like a potential answer, but there could be some like sort of fitting good for it, which I guess sort of goes into like skeptical theism. But that aside, what was the, maybe I wasn't tracking this, but what was the example of the two conflicting goods? Like what was the point in that in regards to like evolutionary animal suffering?
Yeah, so in regards to that, like what's good for so like we can agree that it is good for a particular animal species or for that particular creature within that animal species to survive, right?
Oh, okay. I think I know what you're trying to say. Like, obviously, the food is meant to be analogous to like an animal eating, like predating on another animal, sort of.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, I guess in the analogy that you used about the water, where it's like, I was actually thinking like a sports team. You know, like you're getting chosen for like a sports team. You and your friend. You know, you both really want it, but there's only one spot. And yeah, so I guess in this analogy, what if it's the case, for example, that you know you can only offer he only offers water to like one of us, but what if he actually had the option of offering water to both of us, but instead he offers it to one of us, and we're both you know on the brink of dehydration, we're about to die, and he's like, oh yeah, I can only give it to one of you. But he actually had enough for both of us. In that case, then it's because at least I think that case is more analogous to like evolutionary animal suffering, since you know the common example is God could have made creatures like herbivorous. So this seems like more of a direct comparison to the water analogy. So in fact, there isn't actually a conflict of two goods.
Yeah. So the problem with that is if everything like. And we even see this today. If everything were herbivores, then eventually all plant life would be ruined, and then all herbivores would pass away. So therefore, there needs to be something to limit the amount of herbivores that are out there, in order that way they don't overeat the plant life. And then someone can say, well, maybe there could be a way to limit their ability to reproduce or grow or everything else like that. But that's kind of what the predators are doing already. Now, like I said,
sorry, just to clarify, you said the problem with herbivores was did you say overpopulation? Or what was it?
Kind of. If everything was herbivores, then eventually they would overpopulate to the point where they would consume all plant life. To the point where now there's no food for the herbivores, and then they would die.
Okay.
So the point that I was getting at is like, so the question then becomes, kind of like what you were saying, like maybe it's not, so like basically the point I'm trying to make is like, it might be the case, not that God is deciding to withhold what he's able to give.
Yep.
But rather trying to make sure that there is balance for the longevity of his creation. I don't know. But
okay, I guess in that case, so I use herbivores as an example. My point is that God has other means which can lead to better results. I use herbivores as an example because I think it's, quite intuitive.
Before you get too deep in that, I do want to pause. Like you said, better results. Better results for what? That's the question at hand here. We don't know what result he's trying to go for.
Yeah, I understand.
That's what the fitting question is about. Like, looking at the way that reality is, what is the result that God's trying to go for here? Because we don't know what that result is, but our belief is that because God, has a goal, and because of his perfection, is going to do the most perfect, if not the perfect way to achieve that goal. Therefore, the conclusion must be that this must be the perfect way to achieve that goal, but we don't know what that goal is.
Yes.
Which is why we have these questions.
Yeah, so that's sort of what I was going to get to. I understand your point, right? So, better results, for what? For, as if I know, like, God's psychology, right?
Right.
Well, I probably shouldn't use the term psychology for you, but yeah, so here's the point I was sort of getting at, right? So, at least in my eyes, right, it would be something like less suffering, less evil. Now, of course, you can just say, like, hey, maybe God has, like, a greater plan for all this. And that's why I was going to say that this conversation sort of goes into sort of a skeptical theist, like, sort of theodicy discussion. And yeah, so what you're saying is that God has some, some goals that are perhaps beyond the reach of human comprehension. And, who am I to say that, evolutionary animal suffering is like something unnecessary, is cruel, when God, who knows all things, but I guess...
And just to be clear, I hate using that because I hate cop-outs and it feels like a cop-out, and I know it kind of is, but that is the tradition within the Catholic community.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a cop-out. I mean, it is sort of well defended, and I'd say it's probably one of the better theodicies you can use. I have a couple of problems. So the first problem is, we can sort of, because obviously evolutionary animal suffering is such a horrendous thing, I think we can agree.
Or it's at least a hard pill to swallow.
It's at least a hard pill to swallow. Yeah. So in this case, you would say that, perhaps God has some, underlying reasons for this. At least it's not like shaking your doubt in God, right?
Yeah.
Now, imagine Earth was such that, imagine right now you're like, everything you're experiencing was like some sort of simulation. You awaken from the simulation, and the Earth that you're in right now is currently undergoing the evolutionary animal suffering. And it's been going for like 100 times the amount. And all the goods that are currently that were in the simulation have been like decreased like 10 times less. Would this world be would this world at least sort of make you doubt that a God exists? And if not, then we can sort of run a hypothetical again where, there's another world, it's like 10 times worse. And then the point obviously is, at what point, what sort of suffering would you need to see? And maybe there's not a clear-cut answer for this,
Yeah.
But,
So I actually have a video because that touches on this, because you're touching on this problem. So the title of the video on my YouTube is, let me get it, Impossible Evil, on my YouTube channel. And it is a response to, let me get, because someone asked me to look into this, and the very premise that you're bringing up is the major point of this individual. But let me.
Is it like a paper, or is it like a?
Yeah, I'm getting the name of the paper pulled up here. So the name of the paper is "Evil and the Ontological Disproof" by Carl Brownson III.
Carl Brownson III?
Yes.
Okay.
CarlBrownson. And in it, he talks about, he basically combines the problem of evil with the reverse ontological argument for God into what he calls
Is that the reverse modal ontological argument?
That's effectively what he's doing, yes.
Okay.
And in there, he calls it the ontological problem of evil. And he says that because they're his basic argument is, if God exists necessarily, then anything that is incompatible with his existence can't exist, even as a possibility.
Okay. But
evil incompatible with God does possibly exist, and he gives justification for it in the paper. And shows why this shows that God can't exist. And I do provide a response to it from a Thomistic perspective. If he hadn't challenged the Thomistic perspective, I would have left it alone, because it does work outside of it. But I don't think his critique works within the Thomistic perspective, and I explain why in my video. But that argument, I think, is what you're trying to get at. So I would greatly recommend reading that paper. Because to help formulate your thoughts a little bit better, because the way you're describing your question sounds like that's what you're touching on.
Yeah. I'll check that paper out. I'll see if it has anything else to offer. I guess what we can probably do is, I have a lot of points probably to bring up, but you probably want to bring up other guests, so I can go for one more point. Okay. I guess it's also. Well, okay, so obviously you're given answers to the problem of evil and a general framework. So maybe it's just going to be an echo of those answers. But I find one other instance of, I guess it's not really the problem of evil in a sense, but I find one more thing highly unexpected on the sort of theist. Again, I have that sort of bias. The theist sort of hypothesis, and that is infant suffering. But the particular data that I want to reference is, if you sum up all the, well, first of all, I want to ask, in Catholic tradition, I'm not too well versed. Presumably you think newborns and children will end up in heaven when they die, regardless.
There is debate on that. My personal tradition is, I have hope that they do go to heaven. But there is a tradition, while not condemned by the church, is a theological hypothesis, which means that one can hold to this, but it's not a teaching, and you're not in danger of violating church teaching for rejecting it. But limbo of the infants.
Okay.
So there is contention in there, but at least for me, I have hope that they are in heaven.
Okay. I'll just run sort of my original assumption that, for example, children under the age of accountability will go to heaven. But you can feel free to not accept that. But yeah, so if you sort of sum up like all infant death, miscarriages,
Hmm.
stillbirths, abortions,
Hmm.
children who've died from like early genetic diseases, um,
Hmm.
like across all of humanity, it sums up to like, and of course the research perhaps can be contradicted, or it can be, the estimate might be like too high, for example. But given
Hmm.
like there's a paper on this, I can maybe pull it up later, but I think it's like over 50% of all of humanity have died in this sort of way, in the way that I've categorized.
Yeah.
And obviously all these people, it's great, I guess, in a sense, because they're all in heaven. But this seems, at least to me, and it might just be my personal opinion.
Hmm.
It might just be like an intuition on my side, but this to me seems like very unexpected on the theist hypothesis that
Yeah.
that most of humanity have died as like young infants, or
Right.
so it's unexpected, at least in two regards. Obviously, the first regard is
Hmm.
that's a lot of suffering,
Yeah.
but a lot of the reason, at least I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, at least in religious tradition, we live our lives trying to live a life of virtue or
Hmm.
worshiping God. Yet the majority of humanity wasn't able to sort of go on with this. It seems,
Yeah.
at least God, when he's like, again, you can deny this, like setting up sort of the world and how it's going to go. Obviously, he knows how it's going to go because he's all knowing.
Hmm.
It seems very strange that he would set it up in a way that over half of humanity die as like before the age of accountability, and they can't
Hmm.
go on to like worship him and all this stuff. But obviously,
Yeah.
this does depend on that statistic, which might be overly estimated, and obviously there's a lot of presumptions baked in that you might not accept on theological grounds. So, but yeah,
Do,
what are your thoughts on that?
yeah. So, are you familiar with um, the term preternatural grace?
I don't think so.
Okay. So, for preternatural grace, it is the uh, theological teaching that when Adam and Eve were created, so when humanity first existed, we had additional graces. Some of those graces were immortality, which St. Augustine defined not as the impossibility of dying, but rather
Yeah.
the possibility of not dying.
Okay.
But so we were immortal. Our body was in perfect union with our will. So, you know how sometimes you'll get desires and you're like, man, I really like you. Let's say you want to exercise, but your body wants to stay in bed. That
Yeah.
wouldn't have existed before the fall. And then the last one is freedom from suffering. Those, so like, and like I said, there are more, but like those are like the three main ones. So the understanding and perspective of the church, like part of the reason why you have all of these, um, 50% plus, or more than 50% of people dying before the age of reason is because we are no longer in that state that God originally created us to be in.
Right.
And because of that, we are now in this fallen state and experiencing the consequences of that fall. Because it didn't just have a spiritual effect on us, it also had, because those graces are supernatural, they were a supernatural way that affected our physicality. We now, in a sense, suffer physically from that as well, not just spiritually.
Okay.
So that's part of the answer. And then as far as like why does he continue to allow it to happen? Um, the general defense is God is able to take that undesired thing and bring a greater good out of it. I think there's a very beautiful prayer that I struggled with for a long time. It said at the Easter Vigil when we're ready to celebrate and welcome new people into the faith. And the prayer goes, "Oh, marvelous fall, that brought us so great a redeemer. And I would always sit there and it's like, isn't the fall like one of the worst things to have ever happened in human history from a theological perspective? Why would we say it's marvelous? Well, the reason why it's marvelous is because, as the prayer says, God made it marvelous because he used that as a way to become man, become one of us, and now we can have this relationship with him that we wouldn't have had before the fall. So he was able to take that great evil and bring something marvelous out of it. And it is my hope that he's able to do the same thing for, what you're describing. But the reason why it even exists in the first place is because of the fall itself, and we're no longer in this state that God intended us to be in from the beginning.
Okay. I think what I'll do is I'll give my responses to those, then I'll let you have the last word, and then and then we can let someone else go on. But yeah, so your first point was, the fall of man.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that, obviously, there was you said there was these three freedoms. What was it, like possibility of immortality?
So it's called preternatural graces, and there's three effects of it that are majorly talked about. There's more to it, but those are the three main ones.
Okay, yeah. So obviously, I'm going to be sort of skeptical of the fall, that it was even a thing. I think the obvious sort of question I would have is, how do you square this with sort of evolutionary history? I don't know if you take like an Adamic exceptionalist view, or if you what's
so the way that I understand Adam and Eve within evolution theory, I think there is a case of a lot of people in the scientific community and the Catholic faith speaking past each other because of the way that we define what it means to be human. In the Catholic faith, in order for someone to be human, you need to be a physical creature with a rational soul. Whereas in the scientific community, a human being is just the term that we use for someone within the Homo sapien category. Maybe Homo erectus they might call this a human being, but it's just a general term to refer to a particular physical species.
Right.
So if we take the Catholic definition as an example, if we discover intelligent life on another planet of a different species that has a rational soul, they would be qualified in the Catholic Church to be called a human being. You even have some theologians who argue that if we ever create true AI, where it would be, a physical thing with a rational soul, they would qualify as a human being. So from that understanding, you can have this entire population of Homo sapiens.
Yep.
And then out of that entire population, God infused a rational soul into two of them. And from those two, the rest of modern humanity, which we have, where we now all have rational souls, come from those two, but they weren't the first two Homo sapiens, is the way that I understand that.
So it's similar to Adamic exceptionalism.
I haven't heard that term, so before I say yes or no, I do want to look into that. But if that's the term for it, then yes. Yeah. Then yes, that's my perspective.
Yeah. Again, I guess I'll get everything out, and then I'll let you have the last word, and then we'll go.
Yep.
So I guess my issue with this, obviously, the fall is what brought about, a whole host of suffering and the lack of the pre something grace.
Preternatural grace. Yeah.
It seems like incompatible because prior to the fall, or this imbuing of rationality and sort of human human recognition within one of the organisms within this long lineage of creatures. Obviously, there was a lot of suffering before that. Evolutionary suffering has been going on since basically the start, before even humans were around. So first of all, I guess there's that. Happy to hear your response for that. And then secondly, I think you mentioned one of your points for the allowing 50% of humans to die sort of as
Before the
infants.
age of accountability, yeah.
Before the age of accountability. One of the problems I have, you said that he might allow that for greater good, so some sort of greater good theodicy, right?
Yeah.
Here's some of my problems with the greater good theodicy. One, again, it sort of devolves into skeptical theism, I feel like. But here's two other things that I sort of take issue with. If there's some evils are allowed for the greater good, and these greater goods that are greater than the standard goods can only be achieved with such evils, then it seems like heaven, which is the greatest good, must include some sort of evil. And then secondly, if you adopt a privation of good definition for evil, and you're saying that some evils or some evils lead to greater goods, then effectively what you're saying is some lesser goods lead to greater goods, which seems also a bit incoherent. But yeah, I guess with that, that's my sort of bit. I'll let you respond, have the last word, and then
you're
call
good.
it.
So most of the stuff that you have, especially on the good, I think is touched on, especially the good in heaven parallel is a very is a point being made in the paper I recommended you.
Sure.
So I do recommend.
What was the name of that paper once again? Sorry.
If you just look up literally just evil and the ontological disproof, it should come up. But actually,
I think I found it.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, look into that paper, and then after reading it, if you're interested, check out my response to it. But as far as the first, almost everything else that you said, I believe can be talked on between that paper and my response to it. As far as the first question of the suffering beforehand, that's where we go back to what we were talking about earlier of we need to get a very firm understanding of what it means for something to be evil. Because if suffering is evil, then yes, that is a problem.
Yeah.
But if suffering is not an evil, then to me at least, it doesn't seem like it is or needs to be a problem. So that's where I think before we really get into this, and this is something I see happening a lot in debates and conversations between theists and non-theists, where there isn't they want to get right into the fun stuff of the problem of evil without doing the prerequisite step of understanding and making sure that both are on the same page on what even the nature of evil is, or even if evil has an ontology.
Because obviously, problem of evil is an internal critique. So
yeah. So at that point, that's where that question comes in from. So that's where I would say that conversation especially needs to take place in before we even get into if there is a problem of evil, because evil actually does exist, then now the theist has to provide an answer. But if we are able to understand evil, and now suffering doesn't fit that category, then there's still other problems within it, but now we're not looking to evolution and suffering and natural disasters as that, and we can focus on what the actual evils are and see if that's still a problem for the theist.
Okay, I understand. I'll sort of think over all of that, and I'll read the paper that you suggested.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think it was a productive dialogue, and I'd love to talk to you again. Maybe sometime you said you're live
Monday to Friday, 9 to 11 Central Time. I do have a Discord. If you want, I can send you. I can follow you. Actually, I think I already did.
Yeah, you already followed me. You can send me is your Discord in your bio or?
My bio is not set up where I can have a clickable link yet, but I do have a link tree where you can copy, paste it, and then it's got all of my stuff in it for you to be able to join. But yeah, and that's for everyone in the chat as well, like if you want to join my Discord, either send me a direct message and I can get it over to you, or just copy paste the link tree in my bio, and I'd be more than happy to have you in. But it was great talking to you, Len.
Yeah, I think it was great, and appreciate you sort of adopting sort of obviously the your conception of God obviously isn't sort of the standard. So I appreciate you sort of adopting the semantics for this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think a lot of people on this app that aren't super good faith, so it's good to have a sort of conversation where it's not attacking each other's throats. But yeah, yep. I'll see you later. Talk to you again.
Absolutely. You have a good one.
Bye.
Bye. All right. So I think I've got time for one more. Let me see. Hello.
Hey.
Welcome back.
Yes. That was a really good call, so I think I have to be extremely bad faith now.
But no, I know you were talking like you still had some things you wanted to push me on, and I figure, hey, since you're friendly, we could probably get it knocked out in like 10, maybe 20 minutes before I have to get off. But yeah, what do you got?
Yeah, well, I wanted to talk about the probably evil stuff as well, because I mentioned that in the Discord server that everyone should join. I do think if we only have 10 minutes, I'll probably not do that this time, though. I'm going to be very, very, very left field, very out of character, and talk about regress. So I have some thoughts, actually, listening today. We've discussed sort of what my thoughts on regress are. I want to just play in your sandbox for a second, because I think there's some implications to specifically the idea that the entire causal chain can be a thing to be independent. That maybe is I'm curious how it squares with your idea of your theology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I guess sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. So that's what premise 3 is supposed to be trying to do. Is so we established the need for an independent thing, and because of that, now the next question is what enables a thing to be independent. And Dr. Blitz pointed out, because I didn't realize that this was a thing, priority monism, which is the reverse of my view. Where priority monism, because I think you saw my conversation where on nihilistic monism. I hate nihilistic monism, and I think it leads to a kind of a global skeptic, but that's a whole different conversation. But priority monism, I can at least see the justification for it, and I do want to have a response for it in my argument. But so the issue that I originally had with the universe being this independent thing is because I concluded that this independent thing, in order for it to be independent, requires existence to be what it is. Now, my particular background is one, I don't know what the terminology for it is, because I didn't even realize that this was a contested thing. But my understanding is that wholes are dependent on their parts. As in, if the parts aren't there, then the whole isn't there. Whereas priority monism argues for almost the reverse, where the parts are dependent on the whole. Namely, if there is no whole, then there are no parts. So under priority monism, it would not be inaccurate to say that the universe does have as its identity existence, because now the universe is not the set of existing things, which was the definition that I was working within. Now it is existence under which all other things get their existence from. So that is a problem or could be a problem for my argument, if priority monism is true. I want to look into it to see if it actually is a problem, or I can still work within it. and then eventually show that basically kind of like what I do with premise 2, where I say, hey, there's an independent thing. Even if you want to say that's the universe for right now, that's fine. Now let's actually investigate that independent thing. If I want to see, like, I need to look into priority monism to see if I can, if it is a problem, how to respond to it. If it isn't a problem, where I can just say, hey, we can agree that there is this independent thing whose identity is its existence, whether it is the universe that we are dependent on or this thing separate from the universe, that's fine. And then we go into the fact that there's only one. And then from there, I might be able to go into the question of like, okay, I used to have it as a dilemma. It might need to be a trilemma, where one of them is a deistic God that doesn't interact with its creation, a theistic God that does interact with his creation, or priority monism. However, if priority monism and deism are true, they'd be almost unidentical from each other. There wouldn't be a way to show one over the other, in kind of the same way that it's near impossible right now to show finite temporal first moment versus infinite temporal past type situation.
Totally. Do you mind? I've actually got some novel-ish questions that are more like just I'm just for the sake of argument just going to grant P2 completely and say that there is an independent thing that is existence.
So that would be P2 and P3.
Yeah. So in that, like, I obviously the intent is to eventually get to a point where there is the one independent thing. Does that mean, in your worldview, that like it wouldn't be possible for there to be two independent things? Like, could there be existence, which is God, and then something else independent, or does it have to just be the one?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah.
Like the last little bit.
Does it have to be the case that there is only one independent thing for your argument, or could it be that there are multiple, and just the one that is existence is God?
So if there are multiple, there are Thomas Aquinas puts forth and maybe we need to do a bingo card as well, and put host mentions Thomas Aquinas, but
filled out instantly, free space.
Yes, but regardless, the Thomas Aquinas, and I didn't realize this until like a few months ago, he does argue that it is possible for a necessary thing to get its necessity from something else. I don't think that tracks as neatly with independent, which is how I'm using it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if that follows.
Now, as far as, so the way that I'm using independent, though, is that independence means that it's, like I said, not dependent on anything else. Now, if there are multiple things that are independent, there needs to be some, as you pointed out, some differentiating factor between them. Yet God is, as you said, the only one that is existence itself. Mm-hmm. But if those things are existence plus some differentiating factor, then they're not something that has existence as their identity. Therefore, they're not the independent thing.
Well, could they be an independent thing? Like, would it be?
I don't see how that could be the case in the way that the argument is working.
I guess the reason that I have kind of reason to ask this question, because it does seem to me that like you do want to get to a point where there's one independent thing, and also, like I imagine it would be a problem. You wouldn't commit to be like, well, if there were 5 independent things, those things could all just be considered God, because then it would be like 5 parts, so that would be contentious. To me, the way that we get to
what might help, because I did run this through Grok just to make sure I wasn't making any obvious or egregious logical fallacies, and it did point out, and this might be what you're trying to touch on, there is a philosophical position that you can have a distinction of a singular thing, and those distinctions be real. And this is a little bit on like what Justin was kind of touching on, where they are distinct things, but still, one one thing. At that point, though, it almost sounds where one could use that kind of logic to argue for a trinity.
Potentially.
Yeah.
The example that's like rattling in my head is that, we talk a lot about benign versus vicious regress, and sort of the way that I've understood our past conversations is that like you can consider a regress benign if it has some sort of external thing that makes it independent. Like, the example is like for the universe, for the causal chain that, I say would be dependent, you say that's vicious, only if it is not itself independent, which would then be God. Well, looking at other forms of benign regress, like for instance, like the number line, which I think we agree is like these are, this is an infinite set of things that is itself like functionally. I would say that like in order for that to be benign, it would be independent, right? In which case we have a second independent thing because the number line exists, presumably.
So I will grant that there can be different kinds of independence. If that's what you're trying to get at, is like, is there, can it be possible for there to be different independence? Yes, there can be different independent things and different kinds of independencies. But for this particular independent thing that I'm talking about, there can be only one of this particular kind of independency, is the argument that I'm making.
Would an independent thing that is would it not be dependent on the things that make them different if they have some sort of difference?
So, well, that's part of the conclusion for the argument that I make as to why there can only be one independent thing who has existence as its identity. But kind of going back to what I was talking about for like the Leibniz necessary truth, like you can also say that that truth is independent because it doesn't require anything external to it to be true. So that's a kind of independency. But
yeah, the way that like this is kind of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the argument, as I'm trying to make it, is it's a combination of several different arguments, and I think what might help is if you look into, because this is like. So my route on this particular argument started when I was like 18 years old. And I was thinking, hey, let me put my atheist cap on and let me try to figure out if I can reason to there being a God existing. And I kind of laugh at the simplicity of the argument now, but because it didn't take into account, the infinite temporal past argument, but I did come to the conclusion, I get my existence from my parents, and they get their existence from their parents, and if that keeps going on, where each thing gets its existence from something else, that must mean that, either everything always gets its existence from something else, and I already had this idea of, you can't have this infinite regress, but I did misunderstand it at the time when I was 18, but but that can't go on infinitely. Therefore, there must be something that is its own reason for existence. Wait a minute, that would be existence in and of itself. Because of that, existence in and of itself, that's God, and that's revealed by the name in the scripture, I am that I am. And then I get to, Thomas Aquinas is in his book on Being in Essence, and I see that he basically did my 18-year-old argument in a much better way, and I have fallen in love with that argument ever since. This particular argument is an attempt to use that particular argument and some of his other stuff from the Five Ways in a little bit more of a modern language to try to help explain that idea that Thomas Aquinas arrived at. If you want to get that idea as far as like what I'm trying to accomplish with that argument, I think that would be a good book. It's only like 20 pages. And it is available online for free. I'll put it in the Discord. But
awesome.
That's the motivation behind this particular argument.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
yeah, I think I will definitely give that a read. Silvernia gave me some infinite regress reading to do, so I'm doing homework.
yeah.
But yeah, I think like just if I could summarize as a final, because I know you have to get going shortly, but just like my final thought, my current standing position is like if I play in your sandbox, it seems to be the case to me that either we have multiple independent things based on the number line and existence, just to say two. There is more than one independent thing, or there is one independent thing, in which case infinite series of dependent things like the number line can themselves be dependent. And if that's the case, I don't know if there's a problem with the universe itself being dependent too.
And that's where that priority modalism comes in from that I need to look into. But if you read that, and I tagged you in it, but I did put the paper in the Discord. But that's the perspective that I'm approaching this problem from. And I know people will try to say that he uses existence as a predicate. I don't think he does. I don't think Kant's critique applies to this particular argument. And that's also why I'm trying to frame my argument the way that it is so that way then, whether existence is a predicate or not, it still leads to this conclusion. Therefore, Kant's critique doesn't apply because I'm not using it as a predicate in the argument. But that's neither here nor there. That's kind of like a behind the scenes of my thought process on what I'm trying to accomplish.
Sure. I promise I'll have something other than regress next time I call it.
But all right. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and end it here. It's great having you up here again. Like I said,
talk again.
I knew that I needed to end it shortly. For everyone else that is in the request box, Exility, I know that you've been there waiting for a while. I will be live again on Monday at 9 a.m. Central Time. Or like I said, if you want to talk to me, I have I work through my computer a lot, so I do have Discord open up on my computer where I'm able to respond to people pretty quickly as I work. So feel free to join the Discord if you've got a question or something that you want to talk about. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming. And I will see y'all on actually Exility. Let me go ahead. So Exility and Ion China. Let me go ahead and follow you. But you can find my Discord on my profile. There's a link tree to it. Unfortunately, you would need to copy paste the link tree because my account isn't ready for me to put links onto my profile. But I will send to anyone that sends me a direct message the link itself. And then, like I said, for Exility and Ion China, I'm going to go ahead and send the link out to y'all as soon as I end the live. But thank you everyone for joining, and I'll see y'all Monday morning.